Democrats continue to bicker and backstab one another after their shellacking at the ballot box. John Fetterman is taking aim at Nancy Pelosi for staging the coup that forced Joe Biden off the ticket, saying, quote, she really tried to, what's the word I'm looking for? She embraced this. She's the godmother. She's the enforcer. Now she's blaming Biden. Well, you can't have it both ways, lady. I added the lady part. Other Dems are searching for answers on why they lost and getting lost in the wilderness.
I think Democrats are in the wilderness, as you just said before. There is no clear leader of the party. Joe Biden is going to be out of office shortly. Kamala Harris just lost the election.
I think Democrats a lot of times surround ourselves with people that will affirm what we already believe. We don't want to hear the bad news.
Someone must tell the usual suspects on the far left that the saying is, when you're in a hole, stop digging, not keep digging. It's important for America to have a center-left party, and for that party to be competitive. And a good first step toward that goal would be to make the voters not want to punch you in the face.
So, Jessica, I'm going to give you the solution for the Democrat Party, and you tell me if it's possible. They need to turn their back on a form of antagonistic activism that has been encouraged in the past because they're loud on social media, and to win back traditional Democrats, which means it's going to be a short-term loss. They're going to lose these activists, but for a long-term solution, which is to draw the moderate Democrats or just normal Democrats back. There's your solution. Do you think it's an impossible ask?
No, I think it's quite reasonable. And a lot of people, that's what they're gravitating towards, kind of return to basics. Let's talk about the things that the widest swath of voters can agree on and kind of shed the extreme positions. Part of why that was a problem, though, in this election is that Kamala Harris's refusal to talk about the culture war issue. So to actually come out and address that they, them, she's for they, them, I'm for you.
A sister soldier moment.
Yes, there was no sistaing there. Really hurt her. And now Blueprint has done surveys of the late breakers, and it shows that the people, they went for Trump, and that culture issues were the biggest driver of that, above inflation. So the people who already knew who they were going to vote for went with inflation. A lot of them did pick Trump. But then other people had seen that ad. I mean, that ad was completely ubiquitous in people's eyes. One thing, though, that and I'm not saying that there isn't a lot of work to do, because there absolutely is. For people who are talking about this as if we got completely decimated, the numbers don't bear that out. So Trump didn't cross 50% of the popular vote. So the majority of Americans didn't vote for him. And Senate Democrats performed really well. So people like Ruben Gallego, Tammy Baldwin, Jackie Rosen in Nevada, they ran 7-8 points ahead of Kamala Harris, which is what was predicted. And that does show that this normie coalition can't exist. It was that Trump had a special sauce at the top of the ticket for a lot of people.
Isn't it true that when you do an SAT test, you get immediately 400 points when you sign it? All right. That's my analogy to the Democrats getting that number. It's just like you just get people who aren't thinking.
Really? I would argue then maybe some people weren't thinking at the top of the ticket. What say you?
I say let's move on. I've had enough of your
I've heard that before.
language,
My lip.
young lady.
Okay.
Jesse.
Yeah.
Jesse, it is when you tell most of the country that they suck, they're going to stop hanging around you. That's why I tell you that you suck, so you leave me alone.
We never even hung around to begin with, so doesn't matter. No, you're right, though. So they went woke, and everybody else thought that was kind of anti-white, anti-man, anti-American. And then so you have millions of traditional Democrats who felt like their party was just ashamed of them. And they couldn't talk about it because the Democrats don't tolerate dissent. You couldn't say or debate anything about COVID or BLM or any of that stuff because they don't allow it. And then the two biggest issues, immigration and inflation, they didn't even listen to the American people. They just dismissed them. And anybody that did talk up, they purged. Elon, Rogan, Tulsi, RFK, just a purge. So they go into this election as a shrinking party, and they didn't debate anybody, so they weren't learning anything, and then they weren't listening, so they were going in dumb and blind. They just thought they could buy and lie their way to victory. So then reality just smacked them in the face. They realized they got toasted, and now they need to reevaluate everything. It's not just tactical. They have to reevaluate who they are. And if you're 60, 70, 80 years old, that's too late. And that is their entire leadership is that age. So they're going to need a young gun to come in, and it's not going to be a woman. My sources are saying they're never running a woman again. It's going to have to be a man, and that's who it's going to be.
You know, Judge, piggybacking on what the idiot said, John Fetterman, he's like speaking out. Is he kind of putting his oversized hat in the ring?
Yeah, although I think he's just putting his hoodie in the ring. I haven't seen him in a hat. Let me tell you something. Fetterman has impressed me a great deal compared to when we first were introduced to him. And here's the problem. The Democrats are the ones who created the hateful rhetoric. We were deplorables. We were garbage. We cling to God and guns as though that's a horrible thing. And they got to live with that. And they have to find out who they are at heart. Otherwise, they're going to be just like Joe and Mika. They're going to be two people who are transactional, trying to save their job, trying to save their power, just like with illegals coming into this country to get them to vote. You know, there is a transactional piece to this. But the truth is that the American people are not going to listen to them anymore. I think that the Democrats have a higher burden now, not just as a party that lost. And when you get the House, the Senate, and the Oval, you did do pretty well. But in the end, it's really an issue of they lied so much that the American people aren't just going to say, oh, good, now they sound reasonable. We're back with them. And there's another thing about Trump that people underestimated about him. Trump is a businessman. Trump understood the importance of reflecting the community or the country that he was representing. And so Trump listened to the younger generation when he went on the Theo Von podcast or on the Nelk Boys. He was willing to listen and to bring them in. You know, he was a businessman who was open to a new paradigm. The Democrats, if they continue with the hate and they continue with cutting back our rights, whether it's the First Amendment or the freedom of religion or parents being domestic terrorists, I mean, it's not going to work for a long time. And Jesse's right. Nancy Pelosi, for all this hogwash about being such a smart tactician, she has made it impossible for a woman to run for president in the Democrat Party for a long time.
Dana, you know, I think one of the sins of I would say the old guard of the Democratic Party was they didn't stand up to the identity politics. They probably knew that it was undermining the cohesion of the melting pot, but they were like, you know what? Maybe they gave them space, and suddenly that started to kind of create a rot.
Yeah, so you mentioned that there's the media piece of it, but also I would say the advocacy groups like Human Rights Watch, right? The Democrats care way too much about what Human Rights Watch would think. So they have their advocacy groups that I think are a large part to blame. And then also the way that they raise all of this money, right? Hollywood, I would not listen to them. Again, maybe take them, like, it's not like they're giving you a lot of money. You have to pay them to show up to support you. This was, that's the whole Oprah thing. But the die was cast when Biden decided not to get out in 2023. And, you know, you could blame Nancy Pelosi. She's taking some blame now. The next blame is going to come to Kamala Harris, who should have known that the 4 lies that they told at the White House for so many years on inflation is a high-class problem, not an issue, the border's secure, crime is actually going down, and Biden is the most energetic person in the White House. They did that every single day from the White House podium, and it cast the die for them to lose this election a long time ago.
Very succinct,
Thank
Dana.
you.
Very succinct.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.